when we're living our lives sacrificially in the way that God intends us to, the desires of our heart are going to be what God's desires are. And so in that sense, it's not, hey, God, can I please have a Lamborghini? That's a fleshly desire, ministry. Right?
I've been praying that one for a long time, Wes.
Listen, I got to get places, and I got to get there fast.
Because there's souls over there that need me to get there.
Yeah,
quickly.
That's right. The Nissan's not cutting it, God. I need a Lamborghini.
Love God, love people, love people, love people. It's the AC Podcast. For the love of God, love people.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to the AC Podcast. My name is Troy, and I'm here today with Andy and Wes. Good morning, gentlemen. How are we doing?
Doing great.
It's good. It's a wet day here in Toronto, but can't complain.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine it's probably warmer where you are than I am because right now my heat isn't working. And I know the Prairie listeners are probably like, oh, what is it? +3? And the answer is yes. It's only +3.
Cold is cold. Cold is cold. I've been to some pretty cold places. Where I went to high school, it was like regularly minus in the minus 30s. It's not that in Toronto. It still feels cold here. So
well, my thing has always been this. It's not like there's a large population of Manitobans that are just outside every single day in minus 30 and minus 40. Like, oh, well, it's not that bad. No, you're fully bundled up entirely. Yeah. You have a scarf around your face because too much skin exposed gets like roasted as if it was the summer. So don't give me that. Okay.
Yeah. Steve hides away in his house.
Yeah.
He's not going outside.
Exactly. Exactly. Before we jump into the podcast, I got to say we have a lot going on at AC. Like our staff meetings are progressively getting a little bit longer, and it's all for good reason because we've just been able to do a lot of things. But Andy, why don't we start with you? Why don't you let people know what we got going on here?
Yeah, lots going on with AC these days. A big one that's coming up that we just want to let people know about is AC is heading to Malawi. If you're wondering where that is, it's kind of like in the center of Africa. And yeah, Troy, myself, Max, our new filmmaker, we're heading out. We got grant funding for our newest film project, which will be in the area of a theology of technology, which will be premiering in 2025. But we're doing something we've never done before. We're opening it up and allowing people to join us on this trip to do ministry. So we're going to be doing a variety of different kinds of ministry. Clearly, film will be the key part of what we'll be doing, but along the way, we'll be serving in various capacities. So we open that up and you can apply to come. We'll be heading off around May 9th to the 21st. So we'll be in Malawi for about 10 days, and you can find out all the details about this and see if this would be a great opportunity for you. Space is very limited, and we'll have a few more spaces available. So check it out quick. Go to apologeticscanada.com, and you can find out more information and put together an application.
And Wes, what else we got going on?
I keep telling people when they ask what I'm up to or how I'm doing, I just keep saying my schedule is full.
Yeah.
Everybody's busy, so I've stopped saying busy because I don't know what that means anymore. But it's full. My schedule is full. I feel like that communicates something more positively than saying, oh, I'm always busy. Because it's all good stuff, right? We can't complain, living the dream.
Exactly.
But every spare moment of my time is devoted to the Can I Trust the Bible series. If I'm not combing through footage, this is probably too much of a visual for everybody, but the other day I was sitting in the bath and I was reading over a narration, timing myself to make sure that it wasn't too long. And my wife, Melissa, was just like, what are you doing? Like, talking to yourself with your phone?
In the bathtub.
In the
bathtub? Yeah. Just trying to make sure those narrations fit within a time period.
Keep the splashes in the audio, please.
Yeah, exactly. But we are very excited to be premiering the Can I Trust the Bible series, which Andy and I have worked on relentlessly. For those that don't know, in last summer, Andy and I, along with a filmmaker, headed over to Egypt, and we filmed a bunch of stuff related to the history of the text of the Bible. So we are going to be premiering that this upcoming February, the last weekend of February, February 29th at Columbia Bible College. It's going to be somewhat of a pre-conference to the main conference over there in Abbotsford. And we're really excited to share that with you and have Andy and I sit down and do some question and response alongside the videos. It's being catered by Afterthoughts, which I'm told is great.
Yeah, that's what I keep hearing.
I've never experienced it, but everybody who knows where that is goes, "Oh, nice."
Yeah.
So I'm
That's
assuming
exactly the response.
That's a good
I'll come
response.
for the desserts.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. So really excited about that upcoming event. And if you want to know more about that or where to find the information, you can go to apologeticscanada.com and it's on the homepage.
Yeah, we're actually really looking forward to that. And I got to say, this series is amazing. It's a 2-part that has just really come together really well. Wes, you've done an amazing job, and I'm looking forward to showing people the project.
Yeah, me too. I'm super, super excited for it.
Yeah, it's only pushed Wes's hairline back just like a half an inch. So he's that's how
it's
you
a
know it's good.
proximity thing. It's a proximity thing being close to Andy. It's just kind of, it rubs off.
My genes are so brutal, they're contagious.
But by osmosis, I'm losing some hair follicles.
And this is where Andy's villain arc began.
Yeah, this shows you how many video projects I've done.
yeah, no kidding. But, oh my gosh. So everyone make sure you're paying attention to those things. You can always head to our events calendar on our website. We got a lot going on. There's a couple events coming up at the time of this recording that are actually going to be held at Northview Community Church. So just make sure you stay in the loop, pay attention to our socials. Lots going on. And
on that note, maybe I should just say quickly as we get into our topic that I've been doing this thing called Questioning Christianity for a while, where if you got questions, you know somebody that's got questions, we're going to be running that series again out of Northview. Starts up next Wednesday. What is that? Does anybody got a calendar on them? Is that
next Wednesday is the 31st.
The 31st.
January 31st.
Yeah, you can find more information about it on our website or Northview Community Church's website, but love to see you out for that. That was just a freebie. Wasn't supposed to promote that one, but I did it anyways.
How is next week, January 31st?
Yeah, exactly.
I know.
Exactly. We're going to get into today's episode. That was pretty long, drawn out, but there's a lot going on, and it's important for you guys to know that there's multiple ways that you can get interacting with us. Today's podcast, we're actually talking about fasting, and it's one that is I'm really excited for this conversation for a number of reasons, because one of them being that I'm actually in the midst of a corporate fast with my church, and so it's very fresh and at the forefront of my thoughts. But I also know that this is also one of those topics that can cause like a little bit of discomfort for some people, or it's just something that's not talked about a lot. And so I think the best way would probably be to start off with just sharing, first of all, Andy, Wes, your guys' personal experience with fasting.
Fasting is something that, interestingly enough, doesn't get talked a lot about in the church, or at least not from my experience when I first started going to church. But I eventually was introduced to it in high school at a youth event called the 30-Hour Famine. So that was kind of my introduction to fasting. I'd really never heard about it. And I'd actually say, in many ways, I would make the argument, guys, that that's actually not even biblical fasting. That's just denying yourself food to, identify with poverty is what I would say the 30-Hour Famine is doing. And you guys can disagree with me if you like, but...
No, I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, because I think maybe it'd just be good just to clarify when we're talking about fasting, biblical fasting, we're talking about, abstaining from food for spiritual purpose.
Yeah.
I think the 30-Hour Famine is, abstaining for food for, the purpose of understanding poverty.
It's honestly a monetary purpose to a certain degree. It's because I spent some time working with a couple of organizations where we would help high schools do that. And in the midst of that, it was always around a fundraiser, right? It was always for the sake of raising funds for this. Oftentimes it was something overseas or whatever, but yeah, I'd agree.
I think that's a good point, Troy. It's fasting. It's a fasting fundraiser, really. But one of the things that was interesting about my introduction to it was how weak I am. I failed at it every year. Even when I became a youth leader, I failed at the 30-hour famine. And then when I became a youth pastor, for a couple years, I did the 30-hour famine, and I failed every year. And it happened the same way. It would always happen at night. I had gone without food, and I'd start to talk myself into, drinking some water. And then before I knew it, I'd be like, oh, maybe you should just eat some ice cubes. And then the next thing I know, I've got just a buffet in front of me, and I'm just like gorging on food. Like, it would happen the same way every time. Yeah. And I just felt terrible. I'm like, I'm a youth pastor, and I can't pull this thing off, man.
And then the next day, you got to look him in the eye. How's everyone doing with the fast? I'm doing so good this year. Great. Any other testimonies apart from mine? Anyone like me in here?
There's this really funny video of of all things, a Muslim talk show where you can phone in and ask an imam a question. And there was this really funny one that I've seen passed around a couple of times where the guy phones in, and it's during Ramadan when Muslims fast for the period of 30 days. And then so this person calls in and he says, Imam, I'm wondering if I broke my fast because I fell and I ate a shawarma. And the guy's like, excuse me, you fell? And he's like, yeah, and a little bit of hummus. And it's just like, it's like, yeah, no, that's definitely not allowed.
We should probably clarify that during Ramadan, they fast just during the
day.
Yeah. It's like
and on that
sundown, right?
Yeah, sun up to sundown. So that's actually a good transition because we were talking a little bit about fasting last week, Andy, Steve, and I failed to remember that I used to, when I was in university, I would do a lot of outreach with my Muslim friends, and during Ramadan, I would actually a couple of years I would fast while my Muslim friends fasted during the day, in a way to just kind of not only relate to them, but also, I thought, they're showing such a level of devotion, although I think it's largely legalistic in their instances. But why wouldn't I do that? I'm passionate enough about their salvation. Why don't I also fast and pray that God would honor that level of devotion by actually revealing himself to them?
That's cool.
The true God. So there were a couple of years. I certainly didn't do it every year, but there were a couple of years where I would fast, and actually we would get together and we would read the Quran together. And I would try to use that as an opportunity to bring up some spiritual things.
Yeah.
So
that's cool.
That was a number of years ago. More recently, although I do remember the 30-hour famine, World Vision's 30-hour famine as well. Yeah. Although I don't think I ever participated. I just remember it being a thing.
And then it ended with pizza.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, ended with pizza. More recently, our church, so we meet every Wednesday for small groups, but one Wednesday a month, usually the last Wednesday, we meet as a church and meet at the church building and have a prayer service. And over the last couple of years, we've not, it's voluntary, but fasted during that day and then broke the fast that evening when we would come together and pray together. So I've fasted a number of times, and we actually just had a sermon series between our end of our last series and the beginning of the new year. We ended the book of Luke. There's a period of time where we did some stuff with Christmas, and then we had a couple of sermons on spiritual disciplines, and one of them was fasting. So I actually only maybe 4 weeks ago, heard a sermon on fasting. And but I agree with you, Andy. I don't think it's talked about as much as it should be from places like the pulpit.
Yeah. I know for me growing up, fasting was never something that I was unaware of. I know my dad very intentionally over Easter. I can't remember if he would do it for like the Friday to the Sunday or if it was just on Good Friday. I remember specifically he would fast on Good Friday for sure. And then after our Good Friday service, that's when he would eat. And he always explained it to me in that he was fasting so that he could put his like fleshly needs in focus, and how essentially being able to lay down his flesh for the sake of recognizing what Christ did for us. And it was never something he ever, pressured, but he would always encourage, like, if you would like to do it, this is how to do it. And, it was something that always has been in my mind, is always something that I thought about. But then as I grew up, the different churches that I went to, there was a couple that would do, I remember when I was in Bible college, there was one church I was a part of that did a corporate fast. And every single day there was a different prayer point, and they just kind of said, hey, this is what we're fasting. This is the prayer for today. And we're going to fast until this period of time. They had a theme and a subject. And so again, it was something that it was like, oh, that's really cool. I'd never seen a corporate fast like that done before. I'd always seen it as individual, but it was always something that I wrestled with and was challenged with, just because I hadn't done enough, like, actually reading into scripture about fasting. And so my mind was always, am I allowed to tell anyone I'm fasting? But the whole church knows I'm fasting now. Is this okay? And how do I, that was always something that I kind of wrestled with. And then you fast forward to now, the church community that I'm a part of has been very intentional about fasting corporately, but also encouraging you throughout the year. Why are you just waiting for the corporate fast? There's things in your life. There's things that God is trying to, wants to bring your attention to now. Stop waiting for the church to fast and make that decision. And so it's something that has been very well taught in the church I'm a part of now. Is something that is frequently recognized. And actually, we're in the midst of a 40-day fast right now. Now, the beautiful thing about that is, with wisdom, we have some health professionals that are teaching us how to do this in the proper way. Because the goal is to fast, but it's also to make sure that you're doing it in a way that is not going to put you at risk. Because quite honestly, we're not Jesus, who was able to just 40 days, nothing. And so that's been something that's been really beneficial for me.
Yeah, I think a proper understanding of fasting can be really beneficial and helpful.
Yeah.
It is interesting on the flip side to that, Troy. I agree. It is important to do things, in a right way and being careful about it from a health perspective. But yet at the same time, I'm continually amazed at how long the human body can, in fact, go without food.
Yeah.
That going 40 days, for example, I used to think that was not possible. That's absolutely possible. You see that happen all the time. Even when you watch shows like Survivor, they go with very little food for 40 days, just shy of 40 days. But I've seen on shows like Alone where people go, 40 days absolutely with no or very little food.
Yep.
And so it's possible. And I'm just bringing that up because I'm saying, I think some people are worried about going a day without food. How's that going to affect me, sort of thing. It's like, well,
you'll be okay.
You'll be okay. Your body's a lot tougher than you think it is.
Yeah.
But there is the question about, well, what is the purpose of fasting? What is it achieving in my life? Because you could just go on a diet, right? I mean, that's one reason why people stop eating or fasting.
Yeah.
But from a Christian perspective, we're asking, okay, well, why am I fasting? And Troy, I want to, just ask, because you've been just recently fasting and whatnot. Like, what would you answer to that? Like, what's the purpose that's taking place, and what have you received from it?
Yeah. Well, one of the things with our church when we do a corporate fast is we have a theme that kind of is just kind of an anchor point for everybody. But then there's also the encouragement to really seek after the Lord. What does that look like for you? And so this time around, our church was focusing on where it says in Matthew 17:20-21, it says, "So Jesus said to them, because of your unbelief, for assuredly I say to you, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. However, this kind does not go out except by praying and fasting." And our church was focusing on this kind, recognizing that there are some things that we have been praying to God about and to and for. And there's a reality that God has heard your prayer. He's heard what you have been asking of him. But this period of fasting, what it can do for you is actually change your perspective on that situation and that scenario. And really, we kind of coined a phrase to really help put people's minds in the right perspective is like you're going without to go within. You're going without food, not just for the sake of just going out without food, but you're doing that so that you can really let God get into those inner places, because there's nothing like fasting when you're hangry and to really show you where your attentions go. Because some people on the fast, they'll get hungry and then they'll start talking about all the things they can't eat, instead of, wow, this is a reminder and an opportunity for me to be praying about these things that I've actually really cared about, these things that I have been, really going after the Lord for. And so what it's really done for me is it's actually changed my perspective about what my prayer life has been for a lot of years. The something about fasting and praying has a way of reorienting your desires, your passions, the things that I want, versus, man, I'm actually believing this for somebody else. And the challenge has always been, and I've even said this to other people, is like, you care that deeply about that situation. Have you fasted and prayed about it? Well, most people will say no. Then I'll say, well, then clearly we don't care enough about it. So that's really what it's done for me, is it's actually established, what do I actually really care about? And what are some things that I'm just passionate about today?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that lately in terms of fasting, in the sense that the goal is not to feel hungry and suffer, so that God will be impressed by your suffering.
Exactly.
The hunger serves the higher purpose of why you're fasting.
Yeah.
And one thing I've been thinking about recently is there ever a time I need prayer answered more than I need lunch? Or is there ever a time when I need or desire someone to come to saving knowledge of Jesus Christ more than I want a meal?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's when fasting comes into play.
Yeah.
But it's a spiritually motivated move, which I think you've articulated well, Troy, with how you have been feeling going into and participating in that. The method of the discipline should be moved by your motivation to want to draw closer to God and devote yourself in prayer. It's not a mechanistic way of getting your prayers answered, that if you, Troy, fast, there's some type of coercion that gets your prayers answered. Yeah. That's, moralism. That's a theology of works. Yep. You're not manipulating God, but it's working in a way that really highlights your vulnerability and shows in devotion, this is something I care about. Because what other spiritual discipline affects the body more than fasting?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It reminds me when Jesus talks about in Matthew chapter 5 about hunger and thirst after righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And fasting has this way of thrusting food upon your mind constantly. If you've ever been hungry, it just captivates you.
Yeah.
And particularly if you ever see somebody, I was just watching actually Survivor last night. I was watching an old episode and this lady just got kicked off, and she was like so happy to being kicked off, and she like looked at the camera and she's like, I am so hungry. Like
That's funny.
like she had just got she was like, it was like day 30 or whatever.
Yeah.
But when you're hungry, you just keep thinking about food. It's just overwhelming. And one of the things that you can do with that is you can actually use that as a mechanism to be mindful of, hey, do I think about God like I think about food? And do I hunger and thirst after righteousness?
Yeah.
In that sort of way? And then taking those moments when hunger and food is thrust upon you and going, hey, this is a reminder to me that I need to bring this. I have this issue that I'm bringing before the Lord in prayer. And it's kind of like a reminder to you, I am praying, I'm bringing this before the Lord.
It's funny you say that, like quoting Matthew 5, because right then after Matthew 6, 16 to 18, there's instructions of like, okay, you've made the decision to fast, but this is how you should do it, because some of you guys are putting on a show. And it says, and when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigured their faces that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, like clean yourself up, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And I've actually ran into this a few times. Family is around, or I go visit a friend and they say, hey, someone I haven't hung out with for a long time, like, hey man, you want to go out and have a meal and this and that. Some people ask me, they're like, oh, well, do you break your fast? Do you? And honestly, thankfully in 2024, specific to, depending on what type of fast you're doing, there are absolutely ways that you can still enjoy a meal with a friend without breaking your fast. But on the other side of it, for listeners who might be listening, God is not sitting there like, oh, he ate the piece of cheese. Okay, it's over. You were so close. You were so close, but that mozzarella
fell
got
on that
you.
shawarma.
Yeah. Right? Like, and so this is just my encouragement to people. It's just like, we have made fasting, and I think, Wes, you touched on this briefly, we have made fasting very legalistic.
And let's not forget that fasting is something that's talked about and encouraged, and even in cases prescribed by Scripture. Like this is something that God has called us and encouraged us to do. And I think the attitude is so important, in the same way that when we look at the sacrifices in the Old Testament, and then in Hosea 6, when God says, I don't want your sacrifices. They're evil to me. And you can read that incorrectly in saying that God doesn't want sacrifices. But that's not the case. What God is saying is, I don't want you to do this for the sake of doing it.
Yeah.
Like I don't want it to be turned into this legalistic, mechanistic thing that you're doing because you think that I'm like the pagan gods of the other nations, and you can just spell me off. You can coerce me. You can just give me a little bit of food and I'll be okay. Now that's not why I'm doing it. And that's why it's so important that you have this perception that fasting is done for a God-centered sacrificial purpose. Otherwise, it's just going to become miserable. It's just going to become like the people on the shows you're talking about, Andy.
Yep.
There's a great passage in Luke chapter 18, starting in verse 9, that Jesus makes this point that you guys are getting at here, and he does so powerfully with regards to fasting. And he says, to some who were confident of their own righteousness, is setting it up, and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this story. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give 1/10 of all I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He wouldn't even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. So I think that's a big question you got to be asking, right? Is what is the motivation behind what I'm doing? And do I have the right heart going into this? Particularly with something that's so outwardly, or could be, like fasting.
Yeah. And I think it's just an opportunity to really, like fasting, what it did for me is it exposed, I would say, the repetition in my prayer life. And I think I touched on this briefly earlier, because when you're intentionally fasting day after day, you start to realize, man, have I been asking God for the same thing over and over and over? But fasting, what it does is it actually is like, God, what are your desires? What do you desire for my life, for this situation? Because I think sometimes we always go to God with what we want and our questions, but fasting, I say this in all honesty, the longer you have committed to it, a shift happens when you're actually really committed to it, where you start realizing, oh man, I actually have not been just waiting and sitting and paying enough attention to actually what God desires for XYZ. Maybe this is an opportunity for you to go and fast. And maybe it's just a week. Maybe you're just abstaining from social media. Like, you can really fast from anything that is taking your attention and your time. It's not always food. The reason you see food so often is because that is one that is going to affect everybody across the board. Some social media is not a big deal, but food for everyone, because it's your flesh, is actually going to challenge you. And my encouragement is just that. It's like, maybe you start by once a week, I'm going to fast from this. And on this day, I'm going to be praying about that. Not everyone's going to be ready for the 40-day or it could be a challenge, but don't let it become a gimmick that you just do. And then that's where Scripture's talking about. Don't put on the show.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good word, Troy. And while you were talking, it reminded me of Psalm 37:4, which says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart."
Yeah.
And I think we can read that inaccurately and say, I'm praying for something and God's not giving it to me. And I think what is meant there is that when we're living our lives sacrificially in the way that God intends us to, the desires of our heart are going to be what God's desires are. And so in that sense, it's not, hey, God, can I please have a Lamborghini? That's a fleshly desire,
ministry.
right?
I've been praying that one for a long time, Wes.
Listen, I got to get places, and I got to get there fast.
Because there's souls over there that need me to get there.
Yeah, that's right. The Nissan's not cutting it, God. I need a Lamborghini. Unless it's a Nissan GTR. That's the one Nissan I do need.
Yeah.
No, we're
talk about it. Okay, we can go there.
So I think that's what's being talked. And when Jesus says, "If you pray anything in my name, I will give it to you," it's like the same sort of idea. It's aligning ourselves in such a way that the desires of our heart are God's desires, and so therefore we're not disappointed when God says no or God says wait, because we are delighting ourselves in who God is and His good intentions and plans for our lives.
Guys, when you say another aspect too that we've kind of touched on a little bit about fasting, that I think is an important one, is that fasting has a way of humbling us as few things can.
Yeah.
It really reminds you of how needy we actually are, how vulnerable we are. And it also reminds you of how broken you are. Because when we don't have food, it does have this way of showing what's really going on behind the scenes. Like what does the status of my heart really look like? If you want to know what a person's actually like, it's interesting. I've done a number of missions trips over the years, and I would tend to have missions trips only last about 10 days because I knew that that's about how long most people can, keep it together, if you will.
Yeah.
Once you go past 10 days, you really start to see, what people can be like or what's going on. There's a good reason why Survivors is entertaining as it is, right? They got a group of people throwing them on an island and removing all their food and comfort. And guess what? You get drama, and you get a lot of drama.
Yep.
So it has this way of challenging.
It's easy to be your best when you're at your best. Right?
Yeah.
And so I hear this, and then immediately it's like, that's why when I read about the Israelites, in Exodus, I have a little bit of compassion for them because, Exodus 14, they're just like, did we not tell you this would happen while we were still in Egypt? We said, leave us alone. Let us be slaves to the Egyptians. It's better to be a slave in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness. They were hungry.
They were hungry. Yeah.
They're like, forget that slavery stuff. We had cucumbers in Egypt. Yeah. And you're like, really?
Yeah.
The cucumbers?
Yeah.
That's what you're thinking about right now? Right. And it's like, they're just so hungry.
They're just so hungry.
Right? Moses, I think that the text says that Moses is just frustrated with their grumbling. It's like, yeah, that's what we do when we get hungry. We grumble.
And then you see, Moses go before God, and even God doesn't have time for it. He's just like, why are you crying out to me? Go stand before the people and tell them what I've told you. And so even that, Moses has gone before the Lord. And if Moses wasn't prepared for that, he can't deal with the grumblings of those he's been called to lead. I can't remember what passage it is, but there's, I wonder, I can't remember if it's in, I feel like it's one of the prophets, but his instruction when he's speaking to God is just like, he's complaining about something and God says, eat and take a nap. I can't, I gotta.
That's Isaiah.
Yeah, it's Isaiah, right? And it's just like, we sometimes look at these spiritual practices.
Or sorry, no, Elijah.
Okay.
It's Elijah.
Okay. As I said.
At the brook of Carrots, sorry. I meant to say the right person, but said the wrong person.
Okay, Elijah. Elijah, right?
I was just going to say story of my life.
Yeah. That's going to be the name of my biography. Wes meant to say the right thing, but said the wrong thing.
Right. But I see situations like that and I read it, and I've actually needed that in my life. Just being fully transparent, I've had days where I'm just feeling bombarded and I'm just like, oh, life is so hard, this and that. And then Jasmine's like, babe, I think you're hungry and tired. And I'm like,
yeah,
I just don't know. And it's almost like she just shoves food in my mouth. I'm like, oh, okay. Okay.
I'm okay.
I'm okay.
I'm gonna go have
The
a nap.
word for the word for complaining and grumbling in Greek is the word gungusmu, and I've
That's
always thought
amazing.
that sounds like what you're going through. You're just a ball of gungusmu.
I'm feeling like
Like-
Gunga's mood today. I'm gonna get that tattooed
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, I had a very interesting like discipleship moment happen to me as a young man when I became a Christian. I was all gung ho about my faith, right? And I said,
You was gonna
Lord,
say I was all
I'll go
Gunga's
where
moo.
you send me. And yeah, I wasn't Gungus more yet. It's all gung ho, right? About my faith. And I went on this missions trip with the leader of this organization that was putting it on. The ministry is called Delta Ministries. They're out of the United States. Love them dearly. Brian Heerwagen is the guy who leads it. He became a mentor to me, but I'll never forget what happened when I came on this trip. We were heading to Argentina to hike the gospel into the Andes Mountains, and part of the training was him. You know, I'll never forget. He looked at me and he said, "Andy, on this trip, I don't want to hear you complain." And he said it very matter of factly, but he talked about it in a way of discipleship. As a disciple of Jesus, you need to learn to control yourself, and I'm going to help you. And I tell you, man, it had a huge impact on me because I realized as I went into that, and there were moments of lacking food, lacking sleep, lacking comfort, right? Where you start to come out like the issues that you can hide in comfort start to show themselves. And it's this moment where the Lord can come along, you know, side you if you're willing, and be like, we can work on that. We can begin to look more like Christ. And that was the purpose, of course, was that this was a discipleship moment. But it is interesting in our culture. We don't talk a lot about that. We tend to be a culture that seeks to avoid discomfort at all costs, and not to take those moments as an opportunity to align ourselves more like Jesus.
Yeah.
And I got to say, as a young Christian, that had a huge impact on the trajectory of my life and what it looked like to be a servant leader.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was reading 3rd John recently and felt a little bit convicted because 3rd John starts off by John saying, "Beloved, I pray that all may go well with you and that you may be in good health as it goes well with your soul." And what he's saying there is like, as healthy as you are spiritually, I pray that you're that healthy physically.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, ugh, like I am, there are certainly times in my life when I am more physically healthy than I am spiritually healthy.
Yeah.
And if someone said that to me, I think it would be more of a curse than a blessing. You know, I pray that you are as physically healthy as you are spiritually healthy.
And you're like,
Oh no, I'm someone who prides myself on being physically healthy, but have periods of time where my spiritual health is neglected. And something like fasting can highlight that. You know, where are my priorities? Where are your priorities, Wes? If Paul wrote to you and said, "Hey, as spiritually healthy as you are, I want you to be that physically healthy." Like, no, I wouldn't want him to say that. And so that just highlighted for me that a spiritual discipline like fasting, which is really the only, I think I already said this, but the one that highlights your body is the one that impacts your body. You know, prayer, silence, all of these other spiritual disciplines, they don't impact you in the same way that fasting does. Yeah. And so it's a good opportunity to say, okay, let's align that. Let's align something like the vulnerability of my physical health with potentially the vulnerability of my spiritual health.
It's really cool. It's really cool you say that, because it again, like what I love about this topic is there's so much biblical depth to it. Like there's so much around all of it, right? It's not sometimes, you know how sometimes there's topics that are very obscure, you know, but just as you're talking again, it's my encouragement for people is like, as Wes is talking about, you know, fasting and paying attention to his spiritual health, is that everyone's spiritual walk is going to look different in different seasons. And I think our encouragement can be found in Exodus 16 again, where you see God gives them manna. And one of my favorite parts of this is where it says, those that picked up little had more than enough. Those that picked up much didn't, none of it went to waste. And it's just really cool because they're instructed to just, whatever you get, finish it all, because tomorrow I'm going to have something brand new for you. And that'd just be my encouragement for people. Go ahead, Annie.
on that note, I think it's important to appreciate about spiritual disciplines is that there are certain ones that are going to impact you more than others.
For sure.
I call this kind of like your spiritual batteries. When your spiritual batteries are depleted, you need to figure out what recharges you. And I think that it's just important to appreciate is that you might not be able to fast. There might be actually health reasons why you aren't allowed to fast. Well, that doesn't mean that you can't be involved in spiritual disciplines and you can't, do other things, as you mentioned, Wes, from solitude to praying and the like. One thing that I would just encourage people with is to really know yourself and to know what are those areas that do fill you up that you know that you need to be plugged into. Yeah. Like, so for example, for myself, fasting isn't as important to spiritual discipline for me as solitude is. But that isn't to say that we can't participate in those things and grow in our faith, even in those areas that maybe aren't as meaningful to you, but can do that in a way that does challenge your faith and does grow you to be more like Christ and more reliant on the Lord as you walk with him. So I bring that up because I don't want people to walk away from this going, oh, I got to fast. Yeah. It's like, well, maybe, but maybe not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in light of that, Andy, we have something special for you because Troy and I called your boys earlier this morning and they've removed all the food from your house. And no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, enjoy.
Yeah, that's right. Have a good one.
Yeah. Let us know how it goes.
Yeah. You're locked inside your house with no food.
Yeah, I know, because that's an interesting one, by the way. I have teenage boys, and it's like a constant grazing all day long. Like every time I turn around, my child has some food in his hand heading towards his mouth. So yeah, fasting with teenagers might be a tough one.
Yeah. Well, thank you, listeners and viewers, for joining us on this week's episode of the AC Podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, obviously, as well as on your favorite streaming platforms, because we put up weekly episodes and we really enjoy doing it. It's been we've been off to a hot start this year, but make sure to tune in next week when we find more things to think about. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to reach out to us at info@apologeticscanada.com. Once again, if you're interested in the Malawi project or any of the things we have going on at AC, head to our website, apologeticscanada.com. But you know the drill, you know the motto. Until next time, love God, love people. Bye for now.